Whoa, that is so rad! Guys, you'll never believe it! One of the former users of One For All had a quirk that allowed them to turn any solid matter into cotton candy! Isn't that amazing? Izuku will truly become the greatest hero ever once he unlocks all these mighty powers! Cotton candy as far as the eye could see! Shigaraki has no hope of winning! Hey everybody, how you doing? Tekking and Barry here. Got some My Hero Academia news for you today. I was actually really excited reading the last chapter. Chapters this week came out a little bit earlier, which was great, but unfortunately has a little bit of a drawback, because now we gotta wait till like the 27th for the next one of Shonen Jump to come out. But really, really solid chapters all around. No One Piece this week, of course, but I want to talk about My Hero Academia, and the thing is here, we have a little bit of a flashback, okay? So we cut back from the fight a little bit. It's kind of like bookending the chapter. So we start off with Izuku still using the Black Whip, still using the float quirk, that's Nana's quirk, in order to get Shigaraki off the ground, because it's like, if he even touches the ground for even a second, then everything's going to rot and decay, and that's going to wipe everybody out. So he's keeping him floating in the air, and he kind of drops Aizawa and everybody on the ground, and they're freaking out also, because they're like, Izuku! Not good, because Erasure, he can't use his quirk now, so he's got all these quirks using there. He's got hyper regeneration and everything, and then we cut back at the end of the chapter with Izuku launching a full-on, like, 100% attack on Shigaraki, and we'll see if completely disregarding himself in the process. He's like, you gotta hand it to Izuku, you kinda do, because it's like, look, he knows more than anybody how dangerous this quirk is on his own body, and he's succumbed to many broken bones and torn muscles over the course of this story. And after the incident at the training camp, the doc even sat him down and said, if this happens to your arms only a few more times, I think the doctor said, like, 2 or 3 more times, which you'd think in a doctor situation he'd be like, yeah, if this happens again, it's not going to be good. But the doctor specifically gives Izuku an out. He's just like, yeah, you could probably do it again. Maybe even a second time, but a third time, that's too far. You think a medical doctor would be like, yeah, don't do this ever again. It's like firecrackers going off in your damn muscles, Not a good thing. But so Izuku, though, he realizes, like, this is literally like the devil. like literally the devil has been resurrected with All For One's quirk, and if we just let him go, the amount of destruction, like, he literally wiped out like a third of a city like that, and that's its 75% power, okay? So honestly, I think Izuku's like, even if my arm gets torn off in this attack, I have to do it to stop him. So that's how the chapter ends, but that's the bookends. The middle of this chapter, the real, syrupy center of this, if you were eating pancakes, I guess, filled with syrup, is a flashback scene where we see Izuku training in the gym back at UA along with Sue and Sero and Uraraka. And at this point, also, Izuku has an afro from when he was, training with Bakugo earlier, so his hair's kind of poofy. But, of course, he has Black Whip, so he goes up to Sero and Sue. I guess that's the reason she's there. Sero, of course, has the tape quirk, so he's basically like Spider-Man, except with, like, cello tape or whatever. And Suyu uses her tongue as a whip, essentially, so there are definitely other students that are used to using this kind of quirk, so that's why Izuku approaches them. And also, Izuku has the floating quirk, or I think this is maybe the flashback where Izuku is attempting to unlock the floating quirk of Nana, the 7th user, and so that's why Uraraka is there, obviously, to use her powers of zero gravity to kind of help Izuku along. Kind of, like, it's different quirks, like, obviously, Uraraka's zero gravity and Nana's float, and all the other flying quirks, like Majestic's little magical ring quirk. Those are all, like, different kinds of flight, or hovering or floating, but the same basic premise applies. It's just like you're currently in the air, and I think that's the focus of the training, to get Izuku used to, like, balancing himself in the air, and I think he uses his air force to kind of propel himself, and just so trying to get the hang of all that stuff, right? So while this is going on, All Might and Bakugo are kind of off to the side, like having a breather in the gym, and they're kind of watching Izuku train with Sue, Uraraka, and Sero. And Bakugo brings it right up to All Might. He's like, you're not going to be able to keep this facade going for much longer. Like, when Izuku was first admitted, like, it was already weird when Izuku didn't have a quirk for most of his life. And then all of a sudden, one day, he just unlocked a power of super strength that he could barely control. That was already pretty weird, and a lot of other students at UA were like, huh? Okay, but I guess you could excuse that because a lot of the students that are at UA, like, didn't know Izuku at childhood except for, like, Bakugo. So Bakugo immediately knew something was up, and we saw what happened with Bakugo. Bakugo eventually he's not an idiot. It didn't take long for Bakugo to kind of figure out what was going on here. And the other students aren't idiots either, so I think that's what Bakugo's trying to get at. It's like, look, he's like, it was one thing when it was just super strength. But now, he just activated a completely unrelated quirk, Black Whip, out of nowhere. It just exploded out of his body, and he was using it now. And so, yeah, that's a little strange. And on top of that, he can now fly. So, you know, other people are going to start questioning this All Might. They're going to be like, okay, Izuku, you obviously do not have an ordinary quirk. There is something really messed up going on here. And also, some of the students have dealt with All For One before. So they're probably going to start putting 2 and 2 together. That's like, you have an ability that seems, you have a quirk that seems very similar to All For One, Izuku. You have these, like, a bunch of random quirks just kind of mashed together in one thing. Very, very strange. And so Bakugo's like, you think we should just tell them? You know, you think, honestly, like, at least the students, and All Might's like, no, we can't do that. And this kind of gets into the meat of this that I really wanted to discuss, alright? As you can tell with my awesome face tattoo. Who is your favorite past user of One For All? I know we don't know pretty much anything about, like, half of them, but you know what? That's my specialty. Talking about a bunch of characters that we know nothing about, really. So personally, my favorite is the third user of One For All. It's just something about that silhouette that really speaks to me. But no, honestly, my favorite past user is probably Nana, because she's awesome, right? But anyway, yeah. So, the fourth user of One For All, the person that's this individual right here, we do not know their name, nor do we know their quirk, nor do we know anything about their personality, we just know what they look like. Guy seems pretty tall out of all the past users, and has got a really cool face tattoo. We're assuming this is a tattoo. I'm guessing it doesn't look like a scar or anything. If it's a very intricate scar, if it is. Maybe it's something related to their quirk, I don't know. And we don't really find out anything additional about that person's, like, name or personality or quirk in this chapter. But instead, now that Bakugo and All Might are kind of sitting down and having a one-to-one with Izuku not around, he kind of brings up, he's like, well, remember when you gave us this, you know, notebook, and that was like a whole big inspirational moment. That was like one of the things that happened before the time skip, that little time skip happened, where All Might, he's like, you know what? Now, I didn't know that past quirks could resurface in One For All, but now that I know this, I went to the freaking computer, and I did research, and I found out as much as I could. I pulled in all the connections to the police and probably I had and everything. I pulled up everything I could possibly glean from the past users of One For All, what their quirks are, what their names are, when they died, how they died, and everything like that, and I wrote it all down in this notebook. Okay, so here you go, Midoriya. Fight! Fight and win! You know, defeat the opposition. Become the great hero that you were always meant to be. Now, that's always really good and inspirational, but Bakugo brings up, he's like, well, you wrote down a lot of stuff when it came to the 5th, 6th, and 7th users. Keep in mind, All Might mentioned he couldn't find anything about the 2nd or 3rd users of One For All, because they lived a very long time ago. All the members of One For All pretty much died young, and this was before probably proper records were kept of even, like, you know, write down your quirk and what you do and where you go to school at, like, because this was, like, kind of more at the beginning of the phenomenon. Obviously, All Might is the 8th user and Izuku is the 9th user, so really, this notebook only really contains info on 4 through 7, but does it really? It really only contains info on 5, 6, and 7. So Dangoro Banjo, who is the 5th, and then the 6th user, who is the short kind of kid, the kid with the high collar and kind of like the emo shonen protagonist look, and then you have the 7th user, Shimura Nana, who is of course All Might's teacher, so he would know a lot about her abilities and how she fights and everything like that. But then you get the 4th user, the dude, the face tattoo dude. And All Might did write some stuff down about him, but Bakugo states that that stuff is kind of, it was like you half-assed it. And you even mentioned, and we even saw this in the chapter, and I went back and checked, and I didn't even notice back then, because I made a video after that chapter came out too, because that was like a big revolutionary chapter where we find out all these past quirks and stuff. And even in that chapter, you see a scene where we look at the notebook, and part of the notebook is scribbled out. And I just assumed that was like, oh, All Might was like working late and he just like, oh crap, I'm gonna scratch that out, write that in now. But then we get a full view of it and you really see how the pages are laid out. Like the 5th user, All Might writes down like an entire page. Same thing with 6 and 7. But then you get to the 4th user's page and it's like this. It's like when you're writing a paper for school or college or something, and you're just like, man, I have to write down all the different reasons why cotton candy is the greatest invention ever. I don't know, I'm really obsessed with cotton candy right now. It's because I reread the chapter where All Might was making cotton candy. That's why I'm on cotton candy on the brain right now. But it's just like, cotton candy was important and blah, 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 and then blah, 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 blah. And then it's like 11 o'clock on the night it's due, and it's like, I have to write down one more thing that cotton candy was integral for in our culture. Just like, county fairs wouldn't be the same without it, and then that's it, and then that's like the last thing you wrote down. So All Might, he kind of explains it's just like, well, I don't really want to say anything that's speculation. So here's what I think happened with the fourth user. There's a lot of stuff going down right now with the fourth user. Is the fourth user even a hero? Is the fourth user, like, what was the circumstances of the fourth user passing down the quirk, one for all, to Dangoro Banjo, the fifth user? Because All Might also says, he says to Bakugo, he's like, it's not just the wicked that want this power. Not just the wicked. So it's not just villains. So I think what I glean from that is there was a serious problem in the past of one of the former members of One for All saying that they had One for All, like being a little bit more open about it and just telling their friends, their other, not just any random people on the street, but telling their other hero friends, hey, I have this quirk called One for All. It amasses power over a long period of time. There might have been a thing where maybe other heroes were possibly jealous of such a power, or maybe not even necessarily jealous, but felt like they were worthy of carrying it on further. Like, oh, a quirk that gathers more and more power? Well, obviously, like, you think about this, like, if this power was common knowledge amongst heroes, if people knew about how One for All worked, how do you think they would treat the nature of that quirk, how the successors would be chosen? They would probably try to find a successor that has the strongest quirk possible to add to One for All, and then repeat the process. Kind of like how Toshinori was trying to look into UA to see who the strongest student or the best student at UA was with the most applicable quirk that could be added to One for All. That was going to be Mirio. Mirio has a really ridiculously powerful permeation quirk, and also Todoroki. There was also a scene where Toshinori was thinking like, man, if Todoroki got this power, it would be insane as well, right? So that would be the way you think that the culture would view it, and then, like, the hero society would be like, oh, let's get the strongest hero quirks and the ones that embody the like what it means to be a hero the most, and just have them pass it down. But that's not what happened. As was stated in that chapter, it was also explained that, like, the people that have One for All were not the best of the best. Their quirks were not the strongest or anything. It was really just a situation where it was like, I'm entrusting this power to you, and then I die, and all the users died young, so it's like, I'm dying now, I've only had the power for like a few years, I have to entrust it to you now I have to entrust it to you. It really does seem it's just like whoever was available at the time. I already talked about this when I did the One for All successor video, or like all the previous users when that chapter came out, but I also want to bring it up, like, you know, it might have been a situation where, let's say, Dangoro Banjo, the fifth user, was dying, and he got hurt, and he's on the ground, and there's, like, nobody else around except some other, the kid with the black hair shows up, and he's like, are you okay? And he's like, kid, do you want to be a hero? And he's like, I guess I do, yeah, but I'm only a middle school student. He's like, well, too bad. You gotta do it. And I have to pass it because there's nobody else. I have to pass it on to somebody, right? And so I have to make sure the flame doesn't die out. And it might be a situation of just opportunity rather than actually choosing a successor. It looked like Nana was able to choose Toshinori, and Toshinori was able to choose Deku, but that probably wasn't always the situation, right? So it might have been a situation where the fourth user might have explained what One for All is, and another hero might have attacked him, or like, I was like, I want that power for myself now. Give it to me, right? Something else to also bring up is, remember when, after the battle with Stain, when Stain, you know, he had the blood curdle quirk that allowed him to, like, you know, lick somebody's blood and then immobilize them for a period of time? After that battle, All Might was like, oh, I bet you're afraid that the hero killer now has your quirk because he ingested your DNA. And Izuku didn't even think of that. And he's just like, wait, that's a thing? Did that happen? And All Might's like, no. The only way to pass on One for All is you have to willingly give it over. So, like, maybe it's like a verbal command, like you pull out your hair and just like, I willingly hand over One for All to this successor, or something like that. However, there was a caveat to that where All Might says it can't be stolen, it can't be forcibly taken, but it can be forcibly passed on. And so that makes me think that that information came from one of the past users, like one of the past users, without the other person agreeing to it first or really knew what the power was. They just threw it to them and just gave it to them and just passed it on. Might have been a situation like that. Situation where like the fourth user was about to die and there's only one person around and he didn't have time to give that person the whole spiel about one for all, the flame, it will be carried on into the dawn of the new era, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, I don't have time, I'm dying, just, you know, take some of my blood, you know, what? I'm just, okay, and just like, no, you're taking this power, and just like, you just get, and then that's how maybe Dangoro Banjo got it. He just had it, just thrust it upon him or something. He didn't plan for it, it's just how it went down, right? So that's what make me think, like, not all the members, and this is a theory that's been around for a while, that not all the members of One for All were necessarily, like, heroes in the sense of, like, All Might was. Like, All Might was, like, the pillar of the society and everything. Not all the former members of One for All might have necessarily have been heroes. Some of them might have been villains, or maybe some of them might not even necessarily villains, but like vigilantes. Like, you know, because, you know, especially the further back you go, you know, less and less of hero society really existed. So they might have been doing stuff. They might have been heroes in the sense of what it meant to be a hero like 80 years ago, not heroes what it means to be like right now in hero society, right? Like the fourth user of One for All might have had a quirk that's like, you know, he used it like maybe he could fire laser beams or something, and it was much more of just like no real regulation with heroes. It's just like, I'm gonna go and do whatever it takes to really save the day, and he was just a lot more reckless with that ability, right? And with One for All, right? But that's just the way kind of like heroes operated back then until all these regulations were put into place, right? It might be something like that. I could also see the spin that he was a straight up villain. I could also see that as well, you know, but I think the reason All Might did specifically say it's not just the wicked that would want this power. I think that implies something else. I don't think the fourth user is a villain, or was a villain, because he's dead now, obviously. But I think there was something involving him that All Might did research on, probably how he died. Like, here's an idea. What if it wasn't a villain that killed him? Wasn't it? What if it wasn't All for One? What if it was another hero? Like I said, like another hero was jealous, or another hero just felt like it would be better if my power got passed down, and so I'm gonna force you, fourth user of One for All, I'm gonna force you to pass it on to me. And then it might have been a situation like that. Who knows? Might have been Dangoro Banjo might have had that idea or something. Well, no, it might have not necessarily been Banjo. It might have been like a hero forcing the fourth user to pass it on, but then the fourth user got away from him, and before he died, he passed it on to Banjo. It could have been something like that. But I think what happened with the notebook was that All Might, he was doing research, and he found out how the fourth user died, and he wrote it down, but then he was like, wait, nah. And that's either because it was maybe too brutal for Izuku to know about it, and he's like, Izuku doesn't need to know about that right now. Or it might be necessarily on his death, but it might also be something else that All Might found out about the fourth user. But it was speculative. He just maybe was just doing as much research as he could, and he kind of like All Might sort of connected the dots of like, well, if the fourth user did this, and there's another event around the same time that connects to this, oh, maybe the fourth user was, like, maybe there was, like, a villain activity around the time, and that villain activity synced up with the fourth user's quirk. And so All Might, there was no definitive evidence, but the All Might was like, well, maybe this user of One for All was the cause of this. And he started to write it down, but then he stopped, and he's like, well, that's speculative. I don't want to muddy the waters, so to speak. I don't want to... There's a fruit fly buzzing around this entire video. I don't know if you could see it, but it was annoying the crap out of me this entire time. It's just like... But we're almost done. We're almost done with the video, right? Okay, anyway. But anyway, yeah, he writes it down, but then he's like, he scribbles it out, because he's just like, you know what? I don't know if this is for certain, and I really don't want to... I don't want to scare Izuku, right? I don't want to make him think like this is 100% the situation, because you know how Izuku is, especially when you give him information, he's like mumbling about it, like, well, if that's the case, then maybe this and this and this and this and this. Yeah, the kid has maybe some anxiety issues, so it's like probably best just to leave this out for right now. And he kind of strikes a glare at Bakugo. He's just like, not yet. I don't want to tell him stuff that I'm not 100% sure of. Plus, the kid already doesn't really pay a lot of attention. He doesn't really take care of himself. He kind of like is reckless in battle. So that's probably the reason why he omitted it. But who knows? Maybe All Might, like the flashback ended, but maybe All Might told Bakugo the situation. Maybe he's like, okay, Bakugo, I'll tell you the information. I'll tell you the stuff I found out. I possibly might have learned about the fourth user. I don't know, but you can't tell Izuku. And Bakugo, once again, is a smart guy, and he knows how Izuku is. So maybe once All Might tells Bakugo, if he does, about like the fourth user and what he found out, then Bakugo would be like, yeah, okay, I understand why you didn't tell him that. I won't tell him that either until maybe later when we figure out some more information here. But tell you what, the reason why is this the fourth user, for example, like is there any particular reason? Well, I thought of two. One of them is more of just a symbolic reason. 4 or she in Japanese is kind of an unlucky number. It's kind of the equivalent of like the number 13 because it's like the 4 can be read as she, which means death, or the kanji for death. Okay, so I understand why Horikoshi made the fourth user. Like, oh, there's some messed up stuff going on with the fourth user because that's an unlucky number. It'd be like, congratulations, you're now the 13th user of One for All. I'd be like, oh, that's not good. You know, just because of the 13 number. So the same thing with 4. But also, the fourth user came right after the third user, and we don't know anything about the second or third user. So it might have been the third user. Something happened with that person, and then had to maybe pass on the quirk, perhaps forcibly, onto the fourth user, and then there's a story there. There's a story, but that's as far back as All Might could learn in the research. Because all the users of One for All died relatively young, except for All Might, because All Might is like, I honestly think All Might is probably in his early 50s. It's always kept a secret of how old All Might really is, Toshinori, but I think he's probably going to be either in his very late 40s or early 50s at like that general range there, so he's been around for a while, and that was like generations ago when he started. He got the power when he was in middle school. That's when he was trained by Nana. So that's probably, you can tack on a good 30 years there, just from All Might being the great and building up as the great hero, the pillar of society and everything like that. So that's like a good 30 years right there. But beyond All Might, Nana and the sixth user, the black-haired kid, and Dangoro Banjo, and the fourth user, the tattoo guy, they might have all had their quirks for only like a couple of years. I guess, I mean, One for All for One, it was stated, lived 100 years ago. Like, he's, like, because even Gran Torino told that to All Might when he was training, like, right after Nana died in All Might Rising. Gran Torino was just like, you know, your opponent is a man that's been alive for over a century. Okay, so maybe each of the individual users of One for All, maybe like the fifth user, like Banjo, maybe he was around for 5 years, maybe around that, but not as long as All Might, certainly not. And these generations just kept passing down. We don't know how long each of them lasted. And the second and third users might have been around for a while too, because we just don't know anything about them. But it's been about over 100 years now, so there's like a certain number where you're going to get to it and like the research is going to die off. But I guess we'll see where this goes. Let me know below on what you think is up with the fourth user of One for All. If he was a good guy, or if he was a villain, or if he was a vigilante somewhere in between, or if it was something else involving the third user that passed it on. Let me know what you think about it, but I'm really liking that. Like, it's a flashback, so we're probably not going to touch upon it right after this in the next chapter, but this might be setting up like this is going to be the next quirk Izuku's going to unlock. So we unlock Banjo's and then Nana's, because Nana we understand, but now it's okay, probably the fourth user is going to be next, and then we'll kind of go into, maybe this is setting up the next arc after this whole crazy battle is over, which whenever that happens, right? Well, anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Tekking101 signing out. I need to go be a fancy waiter today. So I need to go read this book, How to Be a Fancy Waiter in Less Than 20 Minutes. I'm kind of busy. Have a great day, everybody. Tekking signing out.